Hi and welcome to Magic Self and Spirit. I'm Steve. We wanted to try to start looking at some of the content we're writing on Magic Self and Spirit in video form, in live feed form, to be able to share it and make it more accessible with people. And today we wanted to look at the relationship between omniscience and clairvoyance and how that can supercharge your spirit if you work that particular way. Please feel free to ask any questions as I speak, and if not, I'm just going to keep speaking and working with the material. I wanted you to be able to relate to some of the ideas here and have the opportunity to ask questions if need be, but welcome aboard, and we'll go from there. This particular video is called How Omniscience as Clairvoyance Supercharges Your Spirit. And it really is related to the purpose of our work. The reason for our website, the reason for the Facebook page and the videos and the content and the work that we're doing and the teaching we're doing is really to empower people generally to walk their own unique and personal spiritual and magical path, because there's so much spirituality and so much personal development work out there which is about other people's opinions. It's about, you should believe this, you should think that, you should behave in this kind of way. And we're very much more about looking at how do you sort of explore your own path? How do you work with what's right for you? How do you begin to find that journey in yourself? And the thing is, if you work just on beliefs, this is my belief, I believe in the Christian God, I believe in Yahweh, I believe in Allah, these are the rules, this is what you got to do, etc., etc., and you don't have any direct experience away from belief, you don't have your own experience to work with, and you don't honor your own experience, then your spiritual path by definition is going to be much more limited, and it's almost as if what I call the right-hand path, and I'll go into that later on, is all about other people controlling you, telling you what to think, telling you what to believe, telling you what is real and what isn't real, and telling you what your experience can be, and anything that steps out of the experience of that particular system, whether that be religion, say Christianity or Islam or Judaism, for example, or science the other way around, whether it fits a strict definition of what can be real based on whether it can be testable by other people or not. It limits what you can experience, and we have a spiritual ability naturally as human beings. We have that way of being that allows us to expand ourselves so much more powerfully than that. It allows experience to be so much bigger than that, and which is why we're doing the work that we're doing, and why we wanted to write this blog, but also why I wanted to do this live feed and talk about it. Because in effect, the direct experience idea is so kind of vital in that anything else is just not going to be the real thing. It's not going to be the genuine article. There's no way that you can experience somebody else's spirituality apart from in a much more limited form. There's no way you can experience somebody else's direct experience apart from in a much more limited form. And even then it's going to be based on your unconscious ideas, your unconscious beliefs, etc., and you're still not going to be able to reach your own power unless you go for direct experience, which is why here at Magic Self and Spirit we argue that clairvoyance is a key. It is the key, not the only key, definitely not, but a major key that allows you to experience your path in a unique way, because it's about your connection, it's about your relationship to spirit, etc. And we'll come on to more of that in the future of this live feed, of this video. Now, there are three powers, if you like, there are three ideas, if you like, that I would relate, or people generally relate, to being called godlike powers. And there's a kind of split of opinion depending on which direction you go, which path you go to, whether human beings can achieve these powers. Good morning, Carol. Or whether they're just for God. And these powers, for example, are omniscience, which means all-knowing, loosely. The omnipotence, which is all-powerful. and that omnipresence, which is all being in all places at all times. Now, omniscience, I would argue, is something that's reachable. In actual fact, I would argue that it's something that we can actually go towards in our own spiritual development with our own clairvoyance, when we liberate ourselves from the ideas of other people, the ideas of what I would call the herd mentality, the majority of people's common sense, even though they don't know why. And omnipotence, all-powerful, well, that surely is the direction of developing your magic. And if you liberate yourself again from other people's ideas of magic, or religion's ideas of magic, or a particular spiritual path telling you you can only believe that and not that, or what's right, what's wrong, what's good, what's bad, what's evil, what's good, whatever, and you liberate that whole process and begin to speak your own truth, your own morals, your own ethics from your own direct experience, from your own relationship to the whole of the rest of the universe, then this whole question of the development of omniscience almost becomes the point. It's like, I don't have to rely on what everybody else or everything else or religion or whatever believes in order to have my own spiritual experience. But your spiritual experience is not just a kind of one-off thing, it's a driving definition of exactly who you are and how you can actually reach your own potential. And that is the purpose behind the argument that omniscience is something that can be reached. There is a godlike power. It is something that's extraordinarily powerful, but it is something that we can begin to reach as we develop as human beings, but also as we develop, more importantly, as an ego and as individuals. The whole idea that only God can experience omniscience, as a spiritual rebel, I beg to disagree. I think there's so much more. Anyway, let me just turn the page on my notes. Okay. And it all comes down, I think, as a starting point, because it's got to be a starting point, to beliefs that you're prepared to take on at that moment in time. Sure, change further down the line as they no longer become expedient, but also beliefs play this role that they focus our mind in a certain direction in order for us to have a particular experience, and also in order for us to find certain parts of knowledge. But they in and of themselves can become limitations. If a belief is the only thing that can be true, that will limit our spiritual abilities and that will limit our spiritual experiences. But the employment of a belief actually gives us the power to begin to investigate all parts of knowledge and all parts of spiritual and personal power. So, for example, as many people do, seeing the Christian or the Islamic God, for example, Yahweh, Jehovah, Allah, whatever, as totally real, and all other gods as false or demonic, again limits the kind of experience that we can have, that we can tap into on our spiritual journey as we begin to develop our own personal power, our own personal knowledge, our own connection to all that there is, and therefore to omniscience. It's very interesting, actually, if you look very briefly, if you look at the history of, say, the development of the monotheistic religions, particularly Christianity, Judaism and Islam, is that, Yahweh was a storm god. Yahweh was a god of a small tribe in what's now southern Israel, which were primarily shepherds. And they were also a very expansive tribe, a very violent tribe, if you like, and they sought to conquer local tribes, take their lands, take their areas, dominate them. And the whole process was really interesting in that what happened was that when they conquered, say, a local tribe, and this began to expand as they got bigger, the god of that tribe, or the gods of that tribe, obviously weren't real gods, because if they were real gods, they would have won the war, and not the small shepherd tribe. So therefore their gods were cast out as demons and labels as demons, and the small Yahweh shepherd tribe, the I am your shepherd, you are the flock kind of tribe, their god then dominated and became the one and only real God, and therefore counted out a whole range of experience as human beings that we can have, counted out a whole range of knowledge and spiritual power that we as human beings can have, and that's how it began to develop. Now, obviously, I'm talking about this in quite simplified forms. There's much bigger information about that, which I would suggest, that you research yourself, or perhaps we will work with later as a further blog or a video or both in the future. But it's much more about really working with this stuff, that there are whole ranges of other experiences we can have when we let go of the idea that the Christian or the Islamic God is the only God in existence. Because if you move away from that, then your starting point, your spiritual starting point, isn't limited. Hi, Lindsay. It becomes much more powerful. What I call the right-hand path, and I'm gonna start defining it now. It's the spiritual idea that the point of spirituality is some kind of unification with the God being or the universe, depending if you're a Buddhist, for example. So the whole aim of your life, the whole aim of your spiritual life, is to let go of all of who you are and eventually become one with the divine being, and you have no kind of individual ego, no individual personality. You just return to the source in that kind of way. And that primarily is the path, say, for Islam. That primarily is the path to Christianity and Judaism. But it's also the path of many magical traditions, such as a lot of the mystery schools that grew out of people like Dion Fortune. And it's also the path of many of the even to a certain extent of things like Wicca, but it would do that in a different kind of way. Wicca would be more about connecting and surrendering to, say, the goddess and immanence in the spirituality of this world when you die or whatever on those lines. But the whole idea is that there is a being outside of ourselves, a powerful God being outside, or goddess being outside of ourselves, that is really much more about kind of building this sort of idea that you have to let go to that more powerful, that more holy, that more real, that more good, whatever being of your own experiences or whatever. Now, there's another path called the left-hand path, and that is really a path of realizing forbidden or hidden knowledge to become a god in your own right. And given this, that whole goal, that whole aim of omniscience is attainable. Hi, Lindsay, I've just seen your question. This is more of a live feed about a particular subject as opposed to answering particular personal information about people's lives. We do that on Sunday at 1 o'clock Eastern Time, 6 o'clock UK time, or 11 o'clock here in Nicaragua. But I will pick up your question and I'll answer that on Sunday if that's okay. But if you have any questions about clairvoyance per se and how to understand it and spiritual paths, I'm more than happy to answer that on this particular live feed video. Thanks for your question. So we have this opportunity to either see gods and goddesses, angels, demons, elementals, whatever, as entirely independent spiritual beings, huge spiritual beings, etc., which tends to go very much, as I say, with the right-hand path. But also we can see those beings as archetypal kind of beings in a sort of psychological sense. They represent a set of ideas, a set of energies that as individual spiritual people that we can begin to tap into, that we can begin to see as part of ourselves that have lay dormant in our unconscious minds or in our superconscious minds, and that are like a key that opens up the door to a huge amount of more experience. Or we can take a third path, the one that I kind of like to work with myself because it gives both sides of the equation. I can see these beings as independent gods, goddesses, whatever, and I can see these beings as archetypal energies which I can tap into. And that way I can have both sides of the experience, and that way I can have both sides of the knowledge. And to a certain extent, it seems to me that that's the beginning of the definition of omniscience. And remember, what we talked about with omniscience was it is knowing all things, primarily. And when we begin to see omniscience as the purpose of our journey, as the purpose of our clairvoyance, for example, it then becomes much more powerful. It then becomes much more realizable. And it's all to do with, if you like, the definitions of reality. if you follow a standard spirituality or a standard religion, reality is defined by the beliefs of that spirituality or religion. It's like God made the world in 7 days. He made human beings, he made animals, he made the whole planet, he made the whole universe, he made stars, etc., etc. And therefore reality that goes outside of that story is either not real or is tolerated by people that say, okay, it may be a mythology to explain something, but that God's still very real, whichever. If, for example, you see that particular creation story as a way of tapping into spiritual knowledge and spiritual understanding, for example, in the beginning there was the Word, or in Genesis, and God said, let there be light, and you begin to understand, for example, that language, that the word itself is the power, is the creative power. You can become who you choose to be spiritually, creatively, by using language. By using language magically, quite deliberately, by understanding that sound itself creates things, by understanding the particular thoughts, words and deeds put together create things and create the life that you want to do. Then you have a different relationship to it, and that it's like tapping into it archetypally and understanding that those stories were giving information, were teaching, if you like. They were bringing forward the different ideas of spirituality. And this can be done with creativity as well, because language is creative. Fiction, for example, can become spiritually real if you use it in certain ways. And if, for example, if you look at some of the Lovecraft stories, they're very dark, magical stories, and they were fiction, but they become a very, very powerful spiritual path when you follow them. And, you know, there's a lot of research into that and a lot of evidence of that. If, for example, in a very, very basic term, I've got my hand here, I put it down here on the top, on the table, shall we say. The illusion is, for example, that my hand is feeling the table, but we know biologically that isn't true. The sensors on the skin of my hand are sending informations to my brain, to my mind, and my mind is feeling the table. Now, at the moment, I've got my eyeglasses on and I'm looking into the screen here while I'm talking to you. The illusion is that I can see you, my eyes are seeing you, but the truth is my eyes are sending electrical messages to my brain, and it's all happening inside my mind. Hi, Laura. And the same with all the other senses, the taste, the touch, the smell, etc. So in that context, reality happens only in my mind, and it happens only through interpretation. For example, neuro-linguistic programming talks about the unconscious mind has the ability to experience 11 million bits of information a second. Now, where they get the figures from, I've no idea. And the conscious mind has the ability to experience 134 bits of information per second. Now that's a huge difference, 11 million bits and 134 bits. So what happens is apparently is that the unconscious mind deletes, distorts or generalizes all the information based on what it is it thinks you believe, that it then presents to your conscious mind. So your whole reality, because it can only happen in your mind, you can't actually experience anything outside of your mind. There may be an external reality, but you've got no way of experiencing it because it happens only in your mind. The creation process is very, very personal. So what you call reality really is what happens in our mind. And there's a particular writer, and I can't remember his name, that talks about reality just being a hallucination of the brain, and that when my hallucination agrees with your hallucination to what happened, we then can call it reality, because it's really consensual reality, which is based on hallucination. So this whole idea that spirituality can only be one thing, say according to science, provable, testable, which there's no evidence for that idea either, or it can only be what's good and what's bad, dictated by religion, for example, becomes an absolute nonsense. The whole idea that we can experience much greater things on a much greater level, with clairvoyance and with connection to spiritual beings that are either in the collective consciousness or as part of ourselves, or independent beings in their own rights, and we can work with them as both, becomes a very, very powerful journey on our spirituality. And that way I work as a chaos magician, and I see beliefs as tools. They're not fixed. They're not something that I have to believe. They're not going to be there for the rest of my life. They're not the only way to see something. But if I believe something, it becomes a tool. So if I believe something completely powerfully at that moment in time, if I follow those beliefs with full-on action at that period of time, within a particular idea of reality, say Christianity for argument's sake, I can choose the powerful experiences within that idea of reality. I call it a mask of reality. I put that mask on in order to experience. But when I've had the experience I'm choosing, when I've got the knowledge that I want, I can take off that mask, I can move that idea, I can change that belief and adopt another one and have completely different sets of ideas and experiences, etc., and gaining of knowledge within a completely different field of what is reality. Reality to me is that fluid, and it's true of clairvoyance as well. So I work with clairvoyance quite literally, as in, for example, I have been able to see, hear, talk to, feel, etc. spirits as long as I can remember, all of my life. But it wasn't really until my adulthood that I deliberately, consciously developed clairvoyance, and there were all sorts of other reasons I'm not going to go into at the moment. And I can work with them that way, as they're real, and they're completely real, and my experiences, they're completely real. And I can also work with them as archetypal energies, as part of the collective mind that any of us can work with. And that's exactly what I do. I work with it as if both sides are true and I can get the complete experience. And then it doesn't matter whether it's real or not real in a scientific way or a religious way. It doesn't matter whether it's true or not true. Can I have that experience? Yes. Does it serve other people? Yes. Does it empower other people? Yes. Does it empower me? Yes. It works. And that's why I can work with clairvoyance based on this way of thinking. And therefore I can begin to reach a much more powerful place of omniscience that way. Take, for example, the way religion, Christianity, Judaism, works with what's real and what's not real. It doesn't try and get into that debate originally. What it tries to do was deny humankind access to spiritual reality, to spiritual knowledge, to omniscience, if you like. Take, for example, the mythological story of Adam and his second wife, Eve, in the Garden of Eden. There is a tree right at the centre of the Garden of Eden called the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And in the story, God forbade Adam and Eve to eat the fruit of that tree. They had access to the rest of the Garden of Eden, all the animals, everything, but they didn't have access to that tree. They were denied access to that tree. And they were tempted by a serpent, the devil, Lucifer, Satan, Azazel, whoever, to eat from that tree. Now, and they ate from the tree, and God was angry, and they realized they were naked, and they were thrown out of the Garden of Eden. But let's put that on another side. God was denying human beings the right to the knowledge of good and evil, to the knowledge, to the spiritual knowledge, to the awakening to the consciousness, if you like. And actually that whole process of following and eating the forbidden knowledge, of experiencing the forbidden knowledge, really awakened us as humankind into being conscious. The choice, if you like, that was being offered by that particular mask of spirituality at that point in time is to remain unconscious like an animal, for example, in that unconscious state where the unconscious mind is totally opened up, and like a sheep. And God the shepherd will look after you, or to open your own consciousness, to open your own understanding of reality, to begin to understand who you really are spiritually. And that really is the purpose of that particular myth. You can interpret it from either end. I obviously interpret it from the point of view of opening up my consciousness and my potential. I do eat from the tree of good and knowledge in that kind of metaphorical sense. I follow the forbidden knowledge. And if you think about it, you know, in today's society even, but particularly within, you know, the religious circles, clairvoyance, for example, is a fruit of good and knowledge. The fact that you can talk to the dead, the fact you can talk to beings in spirit, the fact that you can connect with gods, goddesses, demons, angels, spirit guides, etc., is a part of the forbidden knowledge according to the church, for example, you know. And that forbidden knowledge really is very, very interesting because something that Amanda pointed out to me when I was writing this blog in the first place was that in the Bible stories, the priests of the Old Testament were said to be able to commune with Yahweh directly, and it seems that they could gain direction and information. It was access that no one else had, only the priests of Yahweh. And in actual fact, they had a special part of the temple in the centre of the temple that nobody else could enter apart from those priests. And it was always about that knowledge is available, but only under the rules of Yahweh, only under the rules of a particular dictatorial God that said, you know, you can't know this, you can't know this. A bit like a parent looking after young children, you know, yes, you're going to know about that in the future, but we're not going to let you know about that now. We want to keep you in innocence. And maybe what we're looking at now is the opening up of information on a much more powerful level, because humankind is becoming into its own adulthood more, or certainly on the journey to its own adulthood, and can only make its own decisions and can only make its own experiences as spirituality begins to open up. Who knows? But the truth is that clairvoyance, even in the Old Testament, was seen as something that only special people who were under the control of a particular god, and therefore under the control of a priesthood, or under the control of a church or a synagogue, or whatever words we were going to use there, could have any access to at all, and only within certain rules and only within certain regulations. For example, I guess it was okay to talk to Yahweh, but it wasn't okay to talk to Lucifer, for example, you know, even if those priests began to understand really who Lucifer was. So the relationship between clairvoyance and omniscience is what we're arguing is available to all of us. The empowerment and the knowledge of spirituality, when we make it a direct relationship for you, a direct experience for you, is far bigger than just a nice belief system that feels a little bit comfortable, and I'm going to go and ask about, you know, whether my love life is okay. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not putting that down at all. I'm just saying there are many, many more layers of this that become much more powerful and much more incredible. In the age of information, we have a vast array of knowledge available to us, you know, on ancient gods, goddesses, angels, demons, elementals, etc. And through clairvoyance, we can actually experience initiations of these old systems, these old magical systems, these old spiritual systems, which in and of themselves opens us up to even greater levels of knowledge and experience, and an even greater step towards our own omniscience. And it opens up to the possibility that our spiritual growth is unlimited, our potential's unlimited. In fact, we can become godlike beings. So reaching for omniscience as a deliberate spiritual decision, a refusal to accept our own limitations spiritually, can become something that's very, very powerful indeed. Independent thought, valuing your own spiritual experience, becomes a much more powerful path when you choose to develop your clairvoyance, so you've got independent relationships to all that there is, to spirits, to angels, to demons, or to the higher parts of your mind and your unconscious mind. It doesn't matter which one you want to call them. It depends on which experience you're wanting at that period of time. So what is clairvoyance? And therefore, what is clairaudience and clairsentience? The three come together, really. Clairvoyance primarily is defined overall as clear seeing. I think it comes from the French, clair, and voyance, you know, seeing. Clairaudience is clear hearing, and clairsentience is clear feeling, if you like. However, I don't think, as definitions for me, that's particularly helpful, because it's too broad, it's too large. So clairvoyance for me tends to be the connection I have with my spirit guides, to other spiritual beings that I can work with directly, either for my own spiritual development, my own magic, for example, my own path working, shamanic journeying, etc., or to work with, say, somebody on here on the live feed on Sunday, for example. So I get a question like I got earlier on, I can connect with spirit straight away and work directly with that answer. And therefore, to me, that would be a much more powerful and useful definition of clairvoyance. Mediumship, I define a mediumship as really being the medium in the middle, being the middle bit, if you like. But mediumship, really in a practical use term, and most people seem to define it this way, is much more about talking to your or my deceased ancestors, usually recognizable, because otherwise there's no value to it. So I'm speaking to your dead grandmother, she says she left her shoes under your bed, etc., etc. And you know, it is a powerful path in the sense that you can help people with grieving, and it's also a powerful path if you want to work with your own ancestral lines or other people's ancestral lines in order to change things, in order to heal things, or in order to pass magic down them, in order to change the whole of reality of that particular line and the empowerment that can give you and also people of your bloodline. So mediumistic stuff, mediumship can be very, very powerful. How it tends to be used by the spiritualist church is very, very interesting. For example, many spiritualist churches, you know, they go to church on Sunday, they sing hymns, they have church services, and then they talk to the dead, and then they're condemned by all other forms of Christianity because that's somehow immoral or wrong or evil. But yet they're still holding on to the whole idea of Christianity as a base, as an area for their, you know, way of understanding spirituality. And I would say to those people, that right-hand path, that is extraordinarily limited. It's not going to bring you the desire that you choose in the very long run. It won't empower you. But mediumistic skills can seriously empower you to work in some very, very powerful ways. Psychism, I would call, it's like the perception of subtle or non-local energies. It's a way of being able to kind of feel into things, see into things, hear into things around you. It's not necessarily direction to spirit guides or other beings at that moment in time. It's just a way of knowing. It is another definition of omniscience. You can feel it, you can know it because you can feel it. Now, I can know something with people that I'm close to, Amanda, Brittany, whatever, just because I feel it. They could be on the other side of the world or in a different country at that point in time, and you just relate with them, and more often than not you know. And that's kind of how I would see the psychic. It's that kind of connection. What I would say is the development and how the working with both clairvoyance as a goal to help you reach omniscience can become extraordinarily powerful is when you look at the clairvoyant abilities that actually can develop there. For example, if you develop your clairvoyance, what you do is you give yourself an independence of spirituality, an independence of knowledge that doesn't rely on anybody else. It does rely on your ability to say what's right, what's wrong, what's true or not for you, but it doesn't rely on what somebody else thinks, what the church thinks, what a scientist thinks, what your dad thinks, what your school thinks, what your society thinks. It gives you an independence of knowledge, and that gives you the choice of your spirituality, either to be able to surrender your ideas, your beliefs and your experiences to what the herd mind thinks, if you like, or what God says is true or whatever, or what science says is true, depending on your particular bent. Or it empowers you to have your own spirituality that is independent based on what you feel and what you think. You can choose a path of power, therefore, or you can choose a path of surrender. That one, the clairvoyance, can open the door, and one of the reasons I call clairvoyance a key to your magical and spiritual power. It gives you a much more broad expression of yourself. When you begin to understand spirit beings, for example, that you can communicate with and connect with as archetypal beings, as part of your higher mind or your unconscious mind, as part of you as a much bigger self, the expression of you as self becomes much more powerful. And to a certain extent, say on a Sunday when I'm doing the live feeds, answering questions clairvoyantly for people, it is an expression of me. It's my connection to spirituality, it's my connection to the universe, my connection to reality that allows me to answer those questions, that makes it become extraordinarily powerful development of spirituality in self. It's also a practical application of reality. If you start from the whole idea that nothing is real, that it's all illusion, and therefore everything is permissible, the ideas of chaos magic, for example, Then working with beliefs as tools, like we talked about earlier, allows you to access all levels of spirituality without getting caught up in the dualism that says this is right, this is wrong, this is good, this is bad, this is real, this is not real. It just liberates you from that whole process and allows you to have this whole unique, spiritual, magical, powerful journey that doesn't rely on anybody else's opinion or experience to be real or otherwise. In actual fact, whether it's real or otherwise is irrelevant, because nothing is real, it's all illusion. It just depends on what your belief system is, what your background is, what your unconscious belief system is, and what your experience is so far, shaped by the family, the society, the times, the religion, etc. that you have grown up in. And to be able to liberate yourself from those restraints and be able to much more powerfully and broadly experience your own reality, your own spiritual abilities and your own spiritual potential is much, much more powerful process, and it is a lock and a key that clairvoyance can open in that particular way. Spirit literally existing or not, it becomes totally irrelevant. The important point is the experience, the spiritual experience, the knowledge that is brought forth for you, and what you can do with that knowledge and what you can do with that kind of ability. So one of the other things that opening clairvoyance can do, because it allows you to connect with all sorts of beings, ancient gods, goddesses, angels, demons, elemental beings, spirits of the land, etc., etc. It also gives you access to getting information from those beings, whether they be real or otherwise. They still exist in an archetypal way, and it gives you access to be able to therefore initiate yourself in their ways of doing things in that particular spirituality's path, and therefore open up even further information and even further knowledge and power and magic. Hi bro, good to see you. By having a direct connection that clairvoyance allows you with a particular spirit being, whether that's spirit guide, somebody's ancestor, whatever, or whether that be, a god, a goddess, or whatever, allows you further level of power in terms of directly invoking or evoking them. So if I want to work with a particular god magically, or either to reach a certain end or to gain knowledge, when I evoke, when I call to them, when I see them, when I feel them, by having a clairvoyant ability that I've developed over time through my own work, it allows me to directly connect with them in a way that if I didn't work with the clairvoyance and didn't have that clairvoyant ability, that would just have to rely on a belief. It's there, just believe it, as opposed to a direct experience. It allows me also to, when I've been working magically, when I've been working with a magical ritual or spells for a particular end, either for myself or for other people, I can work with my clairvoyance to assess where that magic is, how it's likely to open up. Do I need to add more things to it, or do I need to just let it flow and it will come out either way? It gives me access to that kind of information, which if I wasn't working clairvoyantly, I wouldn't have access to. I would also say that clairvoyance for me is extraordinarily powerful because it can be a service to others. It can allow other people to work through the things that they need to work through, to find the information that they need to find in order to empower their lives and in order to feel okay, in order to feel okay in that moment, in order to heal themselves, but also in order to grow, whether that be spiritually or personally or in their career or their love life or whatever. It doesn't matter. That's not my decision, that's their decision, but I can be a service to them. And the other deep thing I would talk about with clairvoyance in this particular way, and why it can seriously supercharge the spirit, but also can supercharge things for everybody, is that by teaching clairvoyance and magic to other people, by giving the tools to reach your own omniscience, I can seriously be part of your personal and spiritual empowerment, and that too is a great gift by working with spirit in that kind of way. By doing it, the truth is, you are going to be, just by living your life and having your belief, by following that path, you're going to be a challenge to many other people, and at times they're going to be, shall we say, upset with some of the things you're saying. They're not going to like some of the things you're saying, and usually Usually it's not a problem, but enough that people get angry and they'll say things and write things and whatever. So be it. That's the journey, you know. Because you're stepping out of their comfort zone. What other people think, that whole collective idea of what other people think, what's good and bad. If you're not living your life that way and they're not your beliefs and that's not what you're doing, by definition, you're challenging their comfort zone. And look at the response. It's usually illogical, it's usually angry, and it's quite often pseudo-scientific. But the reality is, it creates this whole discomfort in many other people. So what I do is in terms of my work here, I'm obviously very, very open of who I am, but I choose in any moment in time when I'm getting to know someone or meeting someone, whether to reveal that part of myself or not. And if you like, it's a choice of, is that person going to be an acquaintance of mine and never really know me? They could like me and we can get on and whatever, but they never really know me. Or am I just going to be open and have a friendship with this person and or something more, depending on the person, obviously, and therefore open myself up to who I really am, to share who I really am, to share what I do, to share my path, to share what my experiences are. I'm not trying to convert them. I'm not interested in conversion, but I am interested in providing the tools for individuals to follow their own spiritual and personal path and to support them on that. But independence, an independent path, the path of the damned, if you like, is a very powerful path, but it's also a very challenging path. And, it's a big thing to think differently and work differently, experience things differently and live differently to the majority of other people, to the herd mentality, if you like. The other thing that I would say is omniscience is, it's a knowledge drawn from all spiritual directions. It's not a knowledge drawn from just one or two. It's not only drawn from science, it's not only drawn from atheism, it's not only drawn from Christianity, it's not only drawn from Islam, it's drawn from all the ancient religions, it's drawn from all the independent spiritualities, it's drawn from all of those methods and all of those ones that are going to open up and develop for you that other people don't even know yet. And I would say to you, it's also drawn through fiction and creativity. There are different ways of being, there are different forms of magic you can work from the fiction as well that work just as well. For example, you could work, I'd have to develop this, we've been thinking about this, Amanda and I were talking about this. You could develop a whole theory of what the magic was in The Lord of the Rings and then just begin to work those ways, and I bet you'd get some results, for example. It would be very interesting to see. It's something we're certainly going to be looking at. So, as I said earlier, by seeing gods and spirits and angels and whatever, both as real and independent and powerful beings in their own right, and as archetypal energies that are a part of my higher mind and lower mind, and using my beliefs as power rather than something as fixed, using my beliefs as something I work with, not something that I've just got a belief in for the rest of my life, I can experience all sides of the spirituality because I can hold that contradiction in my mind, no problem. It depends on what I want to experience. So if I want to experience, unconditional love of Mother Mary, I can work with Mother Mary as a completely independent, powerful being in her own right, and yet I can have access to her because she's an archetypal being in the collective consciousness, and doesn't matter whether she did or didn't exist, whether she is or isn't real, or whether that being I'm connected to is or isn't real, because my whole process allows me to do both at the same time and therefore give me that knowledge, experience and that magical power. So I would say the greater perceptions, by working more broadly, gives you the greater knowledge, which is the journey to omniscience and possibly the reason for clairvoyance in the long run, if you take clairvoyance at its highest and most powerful potential. It allows you to liberate yourself from the herd mind, as we've talked about. It gives you the power to refuse to subjugate yourself, to bow down to anybody else, whether that be a human, whether that be a spirit, whether that be a god. And in actual fact, on the left-hand path, the alternative path, quite often magicians will take it that way. I am a powerful being in my own right. I am a god, at least potentially in my own right. I bow to no man, no spirit, or God, but I honor them and I treat them with respect and power, and I work with them like that, in that particular way. And by staying in that particular place in myself, by working in those particular ways, it allows me to experience omniscience, omnipresence and omnipotence in a much, much more powerful and direct way than if I need to bow down to a particular God, spirit or whatever. I would say that for me, that the empowerment lies in that belief that I choose to take on board at that moment in time because it serves me at that moment in time. I avoid prayer. The avoidance of prayer is quite deliberate. If I need to pray to another being, I'm seeing them as some kind of higher being, somehow more important, more powerful, more prevalent than I am. And I'm therefore giving away my own power and not working towards my own potentiality. I know there are other ways of experiencing that, and I know others would disagree. Good. But that's how I see it. That's how I understand that because I'm working with the clairvoyance and because I'm using that clairvoyance to aim for omniscience, prayer is actually a denial of my ability to do that. It's not an empowerment of my ability to do that. Or it's seeking permission to reach that level of knowledge which no other being is going to give you, because you don't seek permission to reach that level of knowledge. You realize that level of knowledge. You take that level of knowledge. And just towards the end, now this is probably one of the most controversial things I'm going to say, is that when I'm working with magic and I'm using my clairvoyance in order to have all of those kind of experiences, the most powerful place that I can work with is I am the one and only true God. And I don't mean I am and you're not. I mean, in my experience, I can be the only one, because I can only experience the whole of reality in my mind, including all of you. So when I'm working with magic, if I give away some of that to other people, I deny that that's my experience that's happening in my mind, in my higher mind, in my conscious mind and in my unconscious mind, and therefore within the superconsciousness. I'm denying some of the power that is me as a magician. And clairvoyance allows me access to those kind of experiences as well. So therefore, for me, omniscience becomes one of the major goals of clairvoyance. Amanda and I have developed a clairvoyant course, an online clairvoyant course, which we call Clairvoyance Courses of Spiritual Power. It has meditations, invocations and evocations to open and build and sustain your clairvoyance, your mediumistic abilities and your psychic abilities in the way that we've talked about in this live feed so far. And what makes this course particularly unique is that it's taught from the perspective of chaos magic, that nothing is real, everything is illusion, and therefore everything is permissible, and I would add, everything is accessible too, and therefore you can develop your spiritual knowledge, your spiritual ability and your spiritual power that particular way. Anyway, I've reached the end of my particular talk. I don't know anybody's got any questions about what I'm saying. Please feel free to write them. Amanda, have you got anything I need to add to this? Thank you for people coming in and out. Interesting that people have come on. I've seen my brother on here today, which was wonderful, who's I think is in Dubai at the moment. Different people popping in and out, and it's been great to actually give this talk to express verbally and on video some of the things that we're talking about in our journey on our blogs and the purpose of the work that we do. Here's a link to the clairvoyant course. We have a discount for the first 6 students. Yes, we're going half price for the first 6 students that come in. Anyway, no questions are coming up, so I'm going to close this video and thank you all for popping in and listening and seeing the bits that you saw. And I will be back on Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time and 6 p.m. in the UK for another live feed, but this one on the clairvoyance. Ask Spirit. You just come with your questions and I'll answer as many as I can in 30 minutes. Okay, see you then. Take care.